view this later, but you all know Reverend Jessie Light Wells. She spent some good time with us this summer, and but the rest of the time, Jessie is the campus minister and director of UKirk SMU, which is just a few years old. And Jessie's I think Jessie's story of how UKirk got started and the creative ways that UKirk is ministering to college students at SMU is so inspiring. And UKirk SMU is one of our newest mission partners, so that's really exciting. So let's open with a word of prayer, and then Jessie will tell us some, and then we'll ask some questions. So let's pray. Good and gracious God, we give you thanks for this day, for the blessings that it brings us, for the opportunity to connect and gather in this way. We give you thanks for the many ways that your church lives and exists in the world today, and for the ways that you call us to work together to be the body of Christ. We give thanks for First Presbyterian Church and for UKirk SMU, and we pray that you would guide all those involved so that they may share and embody and live out your love and your hope in the world today. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, Jessie.
Awesome. It's good to see all of you. I'm really fun to be in this space with so many familiar faces. So thanks for welcoming me back. I think the story of UKirk SMU probably begins a ways back when I was in college myself. I went to Vanderbilt in Nashville, and I went to Vanderbilt. This is funny. I actually went to Vanderbilt because I knew that there was a Presbyterian campus ministry there, which is not the reason that most people go to Vanderbilt. I mean, it was a good school, and I was excited about all of that. But I really, even in high school, knew that I wanted a community of faith in college, and I wanted it to be Presbyterian. And so I found that there was a really wonderful campus ministry that is now a UKirk ministry there. And I found a home and a place where I could grow in faith, but also sort of learn who I was and who I was called to be. And I think even then I felt this calling toward campus ministry. And I knew how special that space was and how rare it was to find that kind of space on a campus. And so after college, I went to seminary, and that call kind of continued to percolate. I didn't quite know what to do with it, but I sort of held on to it, and I had the opportunity to work while I was in seminary with another UKirk ministry in Austin. And so sort of throughout my vocational discernment, throughout my training in seminary, throughout my learning and growing, there was this sense that maybe at some point in my life as a pastor, I was going to be called to do ministry with college students. And so as many of you all know, after I graduated from Austin Seminary, I took a call at Preston Hollow as a resident pastor. And so I spent 2 years there, which was a wonderful experience of getting to try on different types of ministry and see what I felt really called to. And I got the chance to know a really wonderful congregation of folks in the area. And so all of that sort of rooted me in Dallas in a way that I wasn't quite expecting. And at the same time, my husband, Zach, was attending the Master of Sacred Music program at Perkins. And so he was on campus at SMU almost every day. He would go from work at Preston Hollow to class on the campus. And that connection sort of organically tied me to this campus and gave me a sense of what was happening there. And that ended up being really beneficial and really helpful to my sense of call. And so it was interesting as he grew in this program, as he sort of rooted himself to the campus, so did I. I started exploring what the undergraduate culture was like at SMU, what was happening there, what did students need and want. And Zach sort of provided me that window into that to say, I think this is happening. I think this is happening. I think this isn't happening. And so by my second year at Preston Hollow, I was starting to look around for calls, knowing that my time there would soon be up. And so I was looking on the PCUSA website and trying to find a campus ministry position in another state, and nothing was coming up. And finally I was like, maybe I need to create a campus ministry. And what would that look like? And is that even possible? And how do I do that? All those big, scary questions of call that I'm sure many of you all have experienced before, where you know that you're being called to something, but you have no idea how to get there. But I was lucky enough to be in a supportive environment at Preston Hollow that let me sort of explore some of those questions. And actually, David was one of my first conversation partners because he was the moderator of the Presbyterian at the time. And so David was super helpful in sort of thinking through how this kind of ministry might connect to the Presbyterian and might connect to other churches. And so slowly but surely, as I started to explore what it might look like to create a campus ministry at SMU, I found a lot of great conversation partners in this area that sort of pushed me and urged me and encouraged me to continue exploring. So UKirk itself, UKirk stands for University Church. Kirk is the Scottish word for church, as you all know. And so in the PCUSA, UKirk has become sort of our national branding for campus ministry. So one of my first steps in creating this ministry was to connect with the network of UKirk ministries. So there's a national coordinator who is a support and resource person for anybody and everybody doing campus ministry across the country. One thing you might be interested in is knowing that no UKirk is structured similarly. So some UKirks are based in congregations. Some are have spaces on campuses that have been there for decades and serving those campuses for a very long time. Some are like us. We're a 501c3. We're our own nonprofit organization as of this year. And so we operate completely independently of one particular congregation, but we have many partners across congregations and the presbytery and individuals. And so you can imagine that supporting all of these ministries across the country is quite the task, especially since we're all different. But I think that the thing that unites us is that we all care about students and we all want to minister to students on their campuses. And that's really where my sense of call comes from, is just wanting to meet students where they are, wanting to go to them and to hold space for them, and not expecting them to seek us out, because the life of a college student is very stressful. There's so much happening day in and day out. And so they really do need space where they are to make meaning and to process and to connect to a Christian community. So when I started envisioning this, Preston Hollow was really generous and agreed to fund the program for the first year of its existence. And that made a huge difference, that I didn't have to worry about money or being able to purchase things, being able to take students out to coffee. None of that was an issue the first year. And so that was a huge gift that the congregation gave me. So that year ended last August. So for that whole first year, we were totally funded. My salary was paid. And part of my biggest task in the first year was to create a board of directors to launch us into the next stage of this ministry. And so Rosie was one of the people that I approached first. And so Rosie is on the UKirk SMU board of directors, along with Owen Gray, who's the St. Barnabas associate pastor, and a handful of other folks from local congregations. So that was a huge step forward in terms of our structuring and our accountability. And as of last March, when we first started meeting, we've built out the board, and the board is now doing a lot of the support and the work to support the ministry that I initially created. And so this is no longer just something I'm doing, it's something that we're doing together. And in the last year, this is kind of crazy to me, but we've grown from having about 5 students coming regularly that first year to having 25 students that are showing up to programming, that are coming to Bible studies and centering prayer, that are attending fellowship lunches, and all of whom I'm meeting with one-on-one for pastoral care. So you can imagine that things look really different now than they did a year ago. And yeah, Rosie said, even during the pandemic, that's really been the miracle piece, is that I was in a position about a year ago to not know whether this ministry would survive. It just felt like everything was so fragile. Like we had just, sort of established a rhythm. I had this core group of 5 students who were amazing, but there were only 5 of them. And I just wondered, like, is this even going to continue, or is this just going to end because of the pandemic? And I'm really grateful that the board was in place by then, because they really encouraged me and supported me through that few months where I was like, I don't know, like, I don't know if this is going to make it. And I think because of our values, because of the way that we've claimed space on campus, we were attractive to a lot of students over the summer. And so I'll say a little bit more about that. There are over 30 ministries on SMU's campus, Christian ministries. And SMU is not a big school. There are about 6,000 undergrads, and there are 30 Christian campus ministries. So you can imagine that there's a lot of competition on campus, which is not great. I don't like that there's sort of this competitiveness between Christian ministries, but it does exist. And one of the reasons I felt called to create this ministry in this space is because out of 30 campus ministries, not one of them was fully open and affirming to LGBTQ students. And so these ministries are sort of competing for students, and yet all of them are closed off to an entire population of students. And beyond that, not many of them offered real spaces for conversations around anti-racism, spaces for students to rest and learn spiritual practices. It just felt like there was space for something different. And so that's what compelled me to feel called to create this. And in the last year, that has really proven to be the reason why students find us and the reason why students continue to be a part of this community. Many of our students identify as LGBTQ. And so having a Christian community where they can bring the whole of who they are and not feel like people are going to judge them or make them change or question who they are is hugely valuable. And in addition, having a community where they can talk about things that are happening in the world, about justice and peace, and what to do with the fact that they're a Christian, but they don't feel like most Christians represent who they are. That kind of space is really valuable to these students. And so I think that that's why we've grown in the last year, is that not many other campus ministries are holding that kind of space for students, a space where they can both be challenged and wrestle with big things and also rest and find a sense of Sabbath and community. So I feel really honored and privileged to get to be a part of that, and to, build relationships with some of the most incredible students. Just to tell you a little bit about who our students are, it's funny, we have a really interesting group. Almost half of our students are dance students, so they're majoring in dance. How that happened is kind of strange. I happened to build a relationship last year with one of the dancers who grew up Presbyterian in Michigan, and she had been searching out this kind of community. And so she brought in, 10 students from the dance program, which just shows that like one key student can be like the evangelist that creates the entire community. But I think the nature of the dance program is that there are a lot of students who identify as LGBTQ. There are a lot of students who are maybe more progressive in their theology and want a community that supports that. So many of our students are part of that program, which is really fun. And a lot of our students are also human rights majors. The human rights program at SMU is relatively new, and it's really incredible. And so a lot of those students are already wrestling with issues of justice and injustice and peacemaking. And so this community is sort of a natural fit for them. And then the rest of our students are engineers and English majors and sort of a hodgepodge of folks from around campus. But it's really fun to see those different groups interact and come together. So I think the biggest honor that I have regularly is just getting to sit with students and listen to their questions and hear them wrestling with vocation, wondering how their faith might inform their daily living, sort of watching them learn how to be a Christian on a college campus. So yeah, that's a little bit about the program. I feel like I'm kind of rambling, but I would love to hear your questions and tell you more about any aspect of what we do and how we do it. So I'll open the floor to y'all for questions. Yeah, Margaret.
So over the past year, I mean, how have you all stayed together, gathered together? Kind of what has that been like over the pandemic? And I assume the students have all been attending class virtually. How do you do that if you're a dance student?
Yeah. That's a good question. Actually, SMU was, and John can speak to this too, being an adjunct person there, or a faculty member. SMU was pretty forthright about coming back to campus, which felt a little scary in the early pandemic days. I think that it felt like a risky decision to have students move back on campus, but 95% of students did come back this year and live on campus. And so the structure has been hybrid, where students are half on Zoom and half in person with masks on, distanced in classrooms. And so early on, we were almost all virtual for our programming. The fall semester was mostly on Zoom. We had Zoom worship, which is our regular weekly programming. We have a weekly worship service with communion, music, just a regular sort of reformed service with a shorter sermon and some reflection and centering space. And so we did that virtually almost all of first semester. This semester, we've sort of pivoted and offered a lot more in person outside because the students are just super over Zoom. And so we've started to worship outdoors, which is wonderful. It's great to sit outside, and we ordered some fancy UKirk picnic blankets that they can roll out and have as a seat. And we've managed to do communion with sort of prepackaged bread and cup in reusable containers. And it's just been really nice to get to see each other and to be in person. So it's been hybrid all year. We did a Bible study on Zoom, but we had centering prayer in person. And so it's just been a mix of like trying to figure out how to do things safely, but also to ensure that the community is being built. And we do have a few students this year that are fully remote. And so that's been a challenge, trying to make sure that they feel connected. They live out of state, and so they're at home with their families. And yet I also feel like they're already so disconnected from campus that it's very important to me to make sure that they feel like they are part of the community and have opportunities to engage. And so there's been a little bit of tension between, do we do things on Zoom? Do we do things in person? And I'm honestly really looking forward to being fully back in person because it'll be a lot easier. Thanks for asking. Yeah, Julie.
Julie?
I guess as far as the background of your students, do a lot of them come, I'm sorry, my internet connection is unstable. So
Okay, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, great. A lot of your students, do they come from a church kind of background, or if they find, sorry, we also have a visitor here. Do you think that some of them are kind of feeling called to join the PCUSA, in which case, would you be able to do that, in-house yourself, or would you need to partner? I just wondered if that came up, that you had a student feel like joining the church, Presbyterian-wide church, not just your individual ministry.
That's a really good question. Our students are across the board in terms of faith background. We have a couple students who grew up Presbyterian, but not as many as I would expect. Many grew up in the church but weren't Presbyterian. So we've got Methodists and Lutherans and Episcopalians who I think at this point are just looking for a place where they feel like they belong over and above a denominational affiliation. We also have students who grew up Catholic. A surprising amount of our students grew up Catholic, and I think are drawn to the progressive theology of the PCUSA, but holding on to the ritualistic, the sort of liturgical pieces, which I think the PCUSA actually offers a really great place to land for Catholic students. And then we have a few who have no church upbringing, and so they're learning all of this for the first time, which is really interesting to accompany those students. But I definitely think that students are drawn to the Presbyterian Church. I mean, some of them are kind of like, I just want a community, like I don't really care about the denomination, you know. But I have other students who are deeply interested in becoming Presbyterian, and you know, we'll watch church services in addition to what we're doing, which just blows me away, because I'm like, oh my gosh, how do you have time to like go to UKirk and watch a church service and want to do all these other things? And I don't know how membership would work. I don't think that folks would join UKirk, but I certainly would want to point them toward a congregation, especially if they were involved there and attending worship there, and say, why don't you join this church? Even in the last month, I've had 2 students approach me and say, kind of in a crisis, like, I think I might be called to ministry. And I'm like, awesome. Like, let's find ways for you to explore that. And so I think 2 of our students will actually be doing church internships this summer, which even a month ago, I did not anticipate. So this has kind of come up really quickly, and it's really exciting because I think one will be at First Pres Dallas and the other will be at Northridge doing a youth ministry internship. But it's exciting to see that students, that is not me telling them like, you should work at a church. It's students saying like, I want to explore this. Is there anywhere I can do that? And so I think that shows too, like the benefit of having church partners, and, you know, both obviously like we need funding. Like it's nice to have churches that are willing to make financial contributions to our ministry. That's always a gift. But even more so than that, it's the people, the relational connections between students and congregation members and students and pastors. And those are just invaluable. And I think that that's really where churches can be helpful in supporting UKirk, is to provide that kind of relational support.
Jesse, can you say more about the finances now and kind of what that looks like?
Yeah, so we are completely on a, like we have to raise our full budget every year as of right now. And so our budget this year is about $76,000, which is not a lot compared to other nonprofits. We're pretty thrifty, and that's part of why, I mean, I enjoy sort of sustainability and ensuring that we're not spending money excessively. And so the majority of our budget is my salary and benefits, and also a program budget that allows us to provide nourishment for students, primarily through food. We're almost fully funded as of right now for our fiscal year. Our fiscal year is July through June. And we've received quite a few grants from churches and foundations, and that's been a huge part of our budget this year, and we've been really grateful to receive those. But also we've received a lot of individual donations from folks like you. And so that has been just really incredible to see folks learn about this ministry and want to support it. And so we are also in the 1001 New Worshiping Communities process, which is a ministry of the PCUSA that supports ministries like this one that are new and that provide opportunities for folks to experience the church for the first time. And so we've received a grant through them this year, and we hope to receive a larger grant next year from that organization. And that's in partnership with the Presbytery. So the Presbytery is also a large partner. But you can see we're kind of pulling threads from everywhere to raise our budget, which is exciting. It's a lot of work to fundraise for this ministry, but it's also a great opportunity to introduce people to what we're doing and to bring people into our work, which is exciting. Yeah, John.
Hi, Jesse. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
So when I do manage to lift my head up out of the academic stuff that we do and the faculty at SMU and kind of look around at students, I'm kind of affected by the, I don't know what I'd say, like the level of anxiety or something, just insecurity that students these days seem to be feeling? I mean, we've had to, of course, a lot of it is the pandemic times, but I mean, we've had to deal with referring out students to real serious mental health resources. SMU, I mean, the campus, they've brought things to make offerings of, like, what is it, like the comfort dogs during finals week or something, and the student center there. I mean, the students are, I'm just curious how much of your ministry is sort of aimed at helping students sort of keep themselves together, or how much of it is sort of outwardly directed for them to find service opportunities or something. Do you find that kind of anxiety level dominating your need for ministry there?
Yeah, absolutely. I see that in almost every student. Just at some point in the semester, this sense of stress and anxiousness and feeling overwhelmed. And I feel like so much of what I try to provide students through programming, but also through one-on-one pastoral care, is just a reminder to rest. I think that gets lost a lot in the SMU culture of sort of competitiveness and ambition and striving. And so I really, I feel like I'm a broken record sometimes of just reminding students that they need to take time for themselves and to take time for God and to create some opportunities for silence and Sabbath in their lives. That's a huge emphasis of our ministry. And that's part of the reason we do worship over and above Bible study. I mean, we offer Bible study, for short-term, like 3-week Bible studies, but a lot of the other ministries that are in existence at SMU primarily offer Bible study. And to me, that is another program that requires students to show what they're made of, or bring something, or in other words, it's more work for them. It's more effort. When you're studying the Bible with a group of people, there's an expectation that you will contribute something. And I just find that worship is the one space where they can rest and fully be embraced by a community and feel like they can connect with God without having to prove themselves. And so that's sort of like a lot of the philosophy behind why we worship over and above other programs, is just to create that space. But I think you're right. I think that's one of the main issues on SMU's campus is mental health and stress and anxiety. And I think the other thing I try to offer is an opportunity for them to connect with each other, because I think that common space and the vulnerability that's opened up when you sit with one another and share meals and sort of have a space where you're not supposed to prove yourself, can help with mental health. That realizing other people are there too, other people are feeling overwhelmed. It's not just me, it's not just you. And so nourishment and rest are two of the things that we really try to provide to students, which is hard because we also want to program, right? We also want to provide those opportunities for service. But, I feel like I try to read the room, read the culture of the campus and say, what would be most beneficial right now? And if we need to host some Sabbath time, then we'll host some Sabbath time. So.
Has anybody tried like a prayer service group, a prayer group, collecting prayer requests and have sort of a prayer warrior time? In my distant past, that was actually a fruitful membership that I had found in terms of getting the students direction out of so much their own anxiety, personal. I don't know, maybe some that you've tried or not.
A little bit, yeah. One of the things that's built into our weekly worship service is a sharing of joys and concerns. And so after our final song or hymn, we go around the circle and have each student share a joy or a concern or a prayer request. And that feels similar. That feels like this sense of like we're all holding one another in prayer. And it can take a lot of time, which sometimes makes me feel anxious, like, oh my gosh, we're spending so much time on this. And then I'm like, wait, this is the whole reason why we're here, right? Like, I'm sure my sermon is great and I'm sure like the music is great, but really when it comes down to it, I think students most want that space, that sort of sharing and that sort of lifting each other up in prayer. And yeah, as Rosie said, there's so many students that are sort of, or there's so many people that are sort of surrounding the UKirk community in additional prayer. And I mean, I count you all among those folks. I think that's why having these connections to congregations is so valuable, because the students know that there are people out there that are holding them in prayer as they're going through pretty stressful semesters. So yeah, I think that's great.
I think it's interesting that, I mean, Jesse and I weren't in college all that long ago, and the conversations we had around mental health were pretty minimal compared to what the conversations Jesse has, the conversations I had with some college students last spring, and kind of that willingness to be vulnerable and to talk about what's making you anxious or how dark your days actually are. It's pretty remarkable, that kind of the willingness to be vulnerable and to show up and to be vulnerable in community like that. It's a unique thing now, and among those students.
Well, because that's, I guess, a question I had sort of relative to the anxiety level that you all describe and that we hear about on the news for students of all ages. But I also wonder, when you talked about getting familiar with the culture at SMU, you know, that's not where I went to school, but know people who went there, and just in my mind, there's a perception of, as you described it, ambitious and striving and I don't know, you know, got to look right, got to drive the right car kind of stuff. And I just wonder, you know, how you would describe the culture there.
I think that's definitely true. I think there's the interesting thing about SMU, and probably a lot of schools like SMU, is that there is still a dominant culture, but then there is a really growing sort of subculture. And that's probably where most of our students come from. I think when people look at SMU, they see affluence, they see sort of, I mean, a lot of privilege, a lot of folks who might have had family or friends that went to SMU. And I think that's definitely still there. I mean, the Greek culture is huge, and there is a sense of sort of, I mean, there's just a lot of money. Like I see students who are flying to Cabo, students who are flying to, you know, all over the place on weekends to go skiing in Tahoe, to do this and that. I mean, there's just, that definitely exists on campus. And what's interesting, this was similar at Vanderbilt too, which is why I think I relate to it a lot, is that was very much present there, is that that's happening, and there are a lot of students that are participating in that. And then there are this whole other group of students who have no access to that, and yet are students at SMU. There are many students who are students of color, who are their first in their family to attend college. There are a lot of students who are commuting from their family home because they can't afford to live on campus, but they were admitted and they want this good education. There are students who maybe they fit that criteria, but they're wanting to get away from the affluence. They're wanting to move away from sort of that sense of just a blank check of privilege. I think that there's just a lot more happening that you might not see on first glance. And those are a lot of the students that we're ministering to. Students who are having to balance a part-time job with family drama that they're involved in, with you know, a full course load. I have a student who's majoring in 5 things, which is crazy. And he can never come to anything because he's got 5 majors. He transferred from Baylor, so he's like making up credits. His family lives here, and he's like all wrapped up in that sort of stuff. He's working 2 jobs to pay for spending money. Like, it's just insane. And he's a Latino, and so he's also sort of part of this like marginalized group on campus. he's also the president of the LGBTQ student group. So he's like doing all these things. And then he's like, I'm sorry, I can't come to UKirk this week. And I'm like, oh, it's cool, but we would love to have you, and he's the one that I'm always like, please take a break, please rest and give yourself some space to just be. But I think you're right. I think that the culture at SMU is also changing. There are growing amounts of scholarships available for students who don't fit that mold. And so I think over the next 10 years, it will be really interesting to see how the student body shifts and changes and grows toward something different. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's for sure changing. I mean, I've been on campus now 10, 11 years, and there's kind of two central places where folks gather for lunch. I mean, there's one of the main cafeterias also has the faculty lunchroom. And so there's a lot of passing of folks that you don't necessarily see in a classroom. And just over the past 2 or 3 years, I think all the faculty have just kind of noticed a big change in the diversity of students that you see coming and going from the Humphrey Lee lunchroom area. A lot more students of color around, and encouraging. I mean, when somebody who went to school in pretty segregated times, I mean, the 60s and 70s, to see students of all sorts of ethnic backgrounds just eating and laughing and socializing together around lunch, total change, and a big change on the SMU campus over the past 2 or 3 years, I would say. But still, there's that old bastion of white privilege. I in the days when I drive up to campus for classes, I'd drive my old, 15-year-old Toyota pickup truck, and then I'd be passed by BMWs and Mercedes, and those are the students. Those are the students driving into the parking lots. And I've always kind of marveled at the homecoming. They give us free football tickets. So there's a homecoming football game, and there's some sort of beauty or popularity contest. And is it the homecoming game or, and all of the fraternities and sororities sort of contribute their nominations for homecoming king and queen or something. And you get to see kind of that old white privilege culture. Really, I mean, these are all blonde, blue-eyed white folks, kids paraded up there. I think there's a contribution these days from the Asian Student Union or something. But really kind of this generational culture gap that's really interesting to see it change on campus.
Well, and it's interesting because, at Vanderbilt, I was Greek, and I had both experiences of I was in a sorority, and then I was also in campus ministry. And I think what you're pointing to too is like, there's still a need to minister to those students too, right? Like, it's not like UKirk is just for the marginalized students. I think there's still really a need to relate to the sort of affluent students. And I think campus ministries are one of the best places to do that, to invite students to just be who they are and not what their money can buy them, and the Greek letters on their sweatshirt or any of those things. And so I mean, that's really a dream of mine too, is to be a space where those students can come and have a place to belong and to be who they really are too. And unfortunately, those spaces are just few and far between on the campus right now. So I'm hopeful that we can hold that kind of space for marginalized students and for privileged students both to coexist.
Jesse, just kind of to finish up, what can we do to help?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for all the support and encouragement you've given throughout this year. I mean, both when I was working at First Pres last summer, I felt like there were so many good conversations and things that made me think and become a better leader. And so thank you for the relational support in that realm. You've also made a contribution to our ministry this year, and I'm just really grateful for that contribution. Many of you have also made individual contributions, and that's also something I'm extremely grateful for. So you can always make a gift to UKirk. Financial gifts are always appreciated. But one thing I'm really excited about next fall is that we will be able to invite groups of people to join us for worship and to bring us dinner, which is one of the things I loved most about our first year of ministry, was having folks from local churches come and bring food, which is like the highlight of college students week, to get free food. So you're guaranteed to get like a huge round of applause for anything that you might contribute food wise. But we'll be opening up that again this fall. So every week we will need folks from congregations to bring casseroles or taco bars or baked potatoes or anything that you might think that college students would like to eat, and bring that to campus probably on Sunday evenings. Yes, Jeannie's specialty indeed.
Jeannie probably has a menu already.
Yes, it's already ready to go. So we will be opening up those signups again, which is exciting. So just keep that in mind. And maybe if you've got a deacons group or a women's group, or, you know, if you just want to get together with some friends and provide a meal, that would be super helpful. And in addition to that, I think your prayers and your thoughts for our ministry are greatly appreciated. I think one of the things that Rosie is sort of leading the charge on is just getting the word out that we exist, sharing the word among people at FPC and in the Presbytery that this is a ministry that is growing and that's providing space for students to belong. I think that this is it's like a secret right now in some ways. I think folks are starting to learn about what we do, but the more that you can share our story, we would really appreciate that. So those are some ways, mostly food. Food is good. Yes, Rosie says, like UKirk on Facebook. That would be great.
Very good. Well, Jesse, thank you for being with us today. Does anybody have any final questions for Jesse? Otherwise, we'll just thank her very much for being with us today, and we'll look forward to ministering with you in the days to come. We're very excited about UKirk at SMU, and especially your work over the past 2 years. Any questions?
Yes, I think I've unmuted. Can you hear me? Good. I wanted to know what your email address was so we can contact you.
Yes, let me put it in the chat. It's jlightwells@smu.edu. And if you can also on our website, which is UKirkSMU.org, you can sign up to get our newsletter, which is I don't send that out very often. It's maybe once every 6 weeks. But that way you'll get our sign up list for our food and fellowship stuff when that comes up, and opportunities to give and to contribute. So you can sign up at our website.
Thank you,
Jeannie.
Very good. Well, let me close us in prayer. Rosie, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask, Jesse, would you say a little bit about the retreat a few weeks ago? Because I think it's like a very great example of how creative you are amidst the pandemic and in pastoring to these students who have jam-packed schedules.
Sure. Yeah. So we would normally do an off-campus retreat, a weekend retreat, which is a good chance for students to sort of actually let go of all of the things that are happening and be present in the space. But with COVID, that's not a possibility right now. And so I structured a weekend retreat over Friday, Saturday, Sunday, with chances for them to come and go. And so they could feel like they could get their other stuff done. And so Friday night we had a cookout and a s'mores campfire at a board member's house in her backyard. She lives about a mile from campus. And so we had, gosh, like 25 students show up to that because food. And 5 of those students were brand new. I had never met them or connected with them. And so it was just this really great opportunity to eat together and to play cornhole and have some space for fun and fellowship. And then on Saturday, we did a 9 to 3. Rosie helped me lead that portion of the retreat, and we focused on vocational discernment. So what is vocation, and what does it mean that God calls us to ways of being in the world, not just what we do to earn money, but also how we live our lives. And so that was such a great day of exploring and talking about how people felt like they should be after college, and was money more important, or was having a good relationship with your coworkers more important? Like some of those deep questions that don't always get talked about. So we did that, and then we ended that day with a service project for the Stew Pot downtown. And so my friend Adrienne, who works at the Stew Pot, came and talked to us about their work, but also about her sense of vocation, which was really cool to sort of pull in how she feels called to that work. And we packed over 100 manna bags for folks experiencing homelessness. And then on Sunday, we had our regular weekly worship service, and one of our students preached a senior sermon, which was so good, and just really cool to see her sense of call. So yeah, it was a great weekend, and it was felt a little patchwork, but I think Rosie's right. Like that's what we do right now with COVID and with sort of managing students' schedules, and it ended up being just a really, really wonderful chance to build community. So yeah, and I'm really grateful Rosie was able to help with that.
I got a t-shirt, so
That's great. Well, Jesse, I've really enjoyed seeing the posts on Facebook and just being able to keep up in that way. Keep those going, and we'll keep spreading the word.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it all.
Thank you. Let's give Jesse a round of applause.
The quietest applause ever.
Jesse, thanks for being with us. Let's close with the word of prayer. Good and gracious God, we give you thanks for the day and the blessings it brings. We especially thank you for UKirk SMU and for Jesse Lightwells. We ask that you continue to guide their paths, help that ministry to continue to grow and flourish, and help us to know how we can best be a part of that ongoing story. In all that we do, we seek to grow closer to Jesus Christ our Lord. It's in his name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good seeing you, Jesse.
Good to see you guys.